So 2 days have passed since Manchester United fell to a 2-1 defeat against Newcastle. And as is to be expected, social media has gone into uproar. Everything has to change, everything is falling down. And yet it's just another day for Manchester United, Phil. How are things with you?
All good, mate. All good. As you know, I've had an interesting couple of days. So, an L for Manchester United, a W for me yesterday, but personally. But yeah, all good, mate. How you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Yeah, I've been spending quite a bit of time trying to navigate through all this toxicity that you're seeing because of one particular result from Manchester United. But I think a lot of people are starting to see the green shoots coming from thereafter. I think it's very important before we actually go on about the football here to address the elephant in the room for anybody that is watching this on YouTube. See over my shoulder. It is sunny in Ireland right now. Right, this is an anomaly. This is the first day in 2026 that it hasn't been raining in this country. So it's got to be some bit of a good day. But
I
Phil,
thought that was a green screen.
so look, it's 2 days since the game. There's been a lot said and a lot digested about this. And there's a lot of people reevaluating their opinions on Michael Carrick and Steve Holland and the suitability of the coaching team down to the suitability of the squad. But in reality, this was one football game at a ground that has been historically difficult for Manchester United to deal with. There's a lot can be taken from it. But before we actually start getting into the nitty gritty, what was your underlying feeling at the final whistle when United lost that game?
It was pretty much the same as I think it was. I very rarely tweet in the first half of games and pass any type of assessment because it just changes so much and you can make yourself look really silly. Um, but it was about after 12 minutes, I put a tweet out saying that, yeah, its tempo looked all wrong. And it did from the first whistle. I remember what I was saying to my son. I'm like, and I'm always on him because he'd be negative. Negative look shake this and like, stop being so negative. The game just started, be patient. But after the first 10 minutes, I'm like, their tempo was all wrong. They're so slow in possession, the lethargy throughout the team, the fact that they didn't look any when they were trying to break, they were just knocking balls long. It was coming straight back at them. There was no build up. It didn't look like it was a tactical issue to me. It looked more like I don't know if it was the consequence of playing two games in a week, where we started to see the limitations of someone like Casemiro trying to play 2 games a week because he looked like he was moving in slow motion in midfield. Was caught for the goal. He was caught before that. It wasn't the only one. Kobe Mainu, I think, put in a really poor performance energy wise. I expect more from a young player with those legs. The the time Malacia thing. Time Malacia should not be allowed. United should play with 10 men before they allow Time Malacia back on a football pitch again. That is honestly one of the worst pieces of defending I've ever seen in my life. And that should be a sackable offence right there, because whatever he was trying to do, it looked like he was down the park with his kids. I mean, there was just no attempt to defend. And so, I think that the tempo from the outset was off. They never had control of that game. They go in one each at halftime, just have an equalised, player sent off. That should have been enough to give them a momentum to go and grab a game by the scruff second half, and they didn't. And I think that it's very hard for me, Sean, to fault Carrick, because to fault Carrick, you have to tell me exactly what would have been different under a different manager. And he's very limited on what he can do. He knew he needed to bring on legs in midfield, but all he has is Ugarte. And Ugarte, and there's another player that just shouldn't be anywhere near a Manchester United first team ever again. Because of the lack of numbers in the deck of squad depth, he is. But he doesn't. Michael Carrick hasn't been able to send a single player. He's had to work with what he had. Ruben Amorim, United were 13th this time last season. Couldn't do this with. He was able to sign Aidan Havant and Dorgu. Okay, not massive signings, but still. I just think that the United are a top 6 team. They were seeing their level. I think the performances recently are reflective of United's level, and I think they don't have squad depth to be able to deal with that if they have injuries. And it's hard for me to fault Michael Carrick for what happened.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wouldn't be faulting Michael Carrick. I wouldn't be going in hard on him. There is a couple of things that I was
Sure, of
shaking my head about, and
course.
we will get to that because it can't just be all good all the time.
Yes.
You have to look at fault because there's going to be fault with most things. Even in victory, there is stuff you can look at that could be done better. But I want to draw back on one thing that you just said, because I know we were speaking in the immediate aftermath. You're saying United are a top six side, and obviously squad depth is something that needs to be discussed as well. But if we're looking at this from a perspective of a starting 11, and I know a starting 11 isn't going to win a title, but a starting 11 can win you games. And we've seen that even during Carrick's tenure against Manchester City and Arsenal. If you look at a starting 11, that includes Lissandro Martinez, and I know Matthias de Ligt would probably be a first choice centre back alongside him if he was fit. But if you have the vast majority of that starting 11 from the other night, and you add in another high quality central midfielder, as is going to be the case in the summer, in your view, is that starting 11 good enough to go out against any team in the Premier League?
I would say, yeah. I mean, if we've seen how they performed against City and Arsenal, who are the two best teams in the league. Whether they're good enough to do it over 38 games, I don't know. They're certainly good enough to do it on a one-off basis against the Liverpool, Arsenal, or City, as we've seen this season. I think United look unbalanced on the left. Cunha's right-footed, so he's very, very good in one-on-ones. Very, very good beating his man, but it doesn't have lightning pace. Inevitably, being right-footed, he wants to cut inside, so you don't get that natural width. I think Carrick knows he has a problem there. Losing left footers, losing Lissandro Martinez, losing Dorgu. Shaw, of course, was taken off for the weekend. I don't think he had his best game. You could see there's an imbalance on that left hand side. Uh, and Bumo and Ahmad haven't looked right since they came back from the AFCON. Bumo, his chance should have scored, was costly. Lani Yoro should score, was costly. There's other instances in that game where United really should have taken chances and didn't. I think that you're just seeing players like the likes of Mbumo, the likes of Ahmad, who are key players for United, drop off. Sesko's been able to fill in that gap, which has been great. But we need these other players now starting to find their form so that we're not so reliant on Sesko. But I think that with a proper left winger, a bit of depth, legs in midfield with young players that can play twice a week, I think, yeah, why not?
Well, you see, this is why I'm asking the question because it's an unfortunate part of media and social media. But whenever something goes wrong, revisionism starts coming into it.
Of course.
And you can go back 2 or 3 weeks and you've got certain individuals speaking about the capabilities of this squad and what they can do under the proper guidance with an individual who's able to put an arm around their shoulder. And then after one sign of adversity, this fella's not good enough. This fella has to go. This fella's not got it. This fella's incapable. I was looking at that team, and I know we've got Harry Maguire and Lenny Yoro playing centre back. They are obviously very good defenders. Over the scale of Carrick's tenure, we have limited the opposition to very, very few opportunities on goal. And I know this is a term a lot of people don't really like, but when you're speaking about expected goals and expected goals against, we've limited sides to very, very little.
Yeah.
When you look at the overall fulcrum of the squad, the general consensus for this summer is that midfield needs to be the priority target. I know left wing is something that's been discussed as well because you need to have the variety and you need to have interchange, and particularly when you're attacking so many cup games, as we hope we will be for the foreseeable future, you need to have depth and you need to have the ability to be able to mix it here and there. But from a starting 11 perspective, if you were to take Casemiro out of that team, as you will in the summer, and introduce a midfielder,
Mm.
say a Carlos Baleba, that is a starting 11 that should be capable of going out and beating Newcastle, particularly an underperforming Newcastle. So it leads then to the overall question of how you've got a dynamic from a side, we'll say at half time, that have just equalised against the run of play. You know that you're coming out after the restart. You have a man advantage and you have all the momentum after what happened right before you go in. It's not about management at that stage. It's not about coaching. It's about the professional understanding of these first team footballers. They should
Yeah.
be able to go out and they should be able to manage a game better. You don't need somebody to tell you this is what you need to do. You need to reinvent the wheel to be able to make full advantage of what we have. But they just looked like they lacked, we'll say, the onus to do so. It was like they lacked the desire to do so. And it led me towards something when I was speaking with Sam Pilger yesterday. I've had this thought process for many years that there's quite a few players in this squad. It seems like they feel like they just need to turn up at times, and that turning up is just enough. And I think that that is a fundamental flaw within this squad that breeds back into the whole culture and toxic environment that we discussed previously. But whether or not this was the byproduct of the players having a 3-day turnaround, or whether it was something deeper, I haven't yet put my finger on. But the one thing that is for certain, there was a complete lack of desire, a complete lack of onus there, and the real lack of ideas to be able to unlock what should have been a side that they should have been able to do so, particularly when you're playing against 10 men, Phil.
Yeah, should. This is, if you look at all the other teams in the Premier League, Liverpool shouldn't be losing at Wolves. Arsenal shouldn't be drawing at Wolves. City did draw with Forest, did they?
City drew 2-2 with Forest, yeah.
They shouldn't be drawing with Forest. City shouldn't be dropping points away to Spurs. When you look at the squads, City were 2-0 up against Spurs, drew 2-2. I think that might have been the last point Spurs got. Should. I agree. I think that inevitably, when human beings don't have competition for places, they
They get comfortable.
the cruising altitude is just to be better than the player that's taking your position, right? And I just think that's human nature. Whenever De Gea, we had the best seasons out of De Gea. We had number twos that were capable of pushing David De Gea to take his place when Romero and stuff was there, which saw David De Gea have much better seasons whenever there was, whenever there was quality number twos that were capable of taking his position. I think you need to have a problem in full back positions. I think the right back position is something that has to be addressed. I don't think Diogo Dalot was a good enough right back. I think that a lot of stuff breaks down on the right attacking ways because per pass selection, per quality, delaying passes, and per quality crosses. And I just think that United have a problem. You could see that United were attacking, or Newcastle were attacking United down the right when Mazraoui was there, with Anthony Gordon was. And you could see that that was an area that Newcastle was specifically targeting United on. I don't think Mazraoui, another player that had a difficult season with injury and since come back from AFCON has barely featured. I think that they have problems in fullback positions. Luke Shaw has been fit for the most part all season, which in itself is a miracle. But I think United, one of the things, Sean, I think is really important is we get an answer to the question right now. Before we appoint Michael Carrick, we get an answer to the question right now. How does Michael Carrick deal with losing a game of football in adversity? How does he turn out? These are important questions that need to be answered right now. I don't think Newcastle was a must-win game for United to finish in the top four. They're sitting in third. The next game is, right? So because you can't turn one defeat into two, because all of a sudden all that darkness is going to come back. And, we all overreact with defeats. We overreact with victories. And you have to be very, very careful with social media being an accurate barometer of anything because it has a very specific model. Enragement drives engagement. And so many accounts just, their negativity is catnip to them and they feed on it. And even when United are winning, they're looking for the negative angle. So many of them are bots. They're not even real people. And it's very easy to get a distorted view of what the sentiment is amongst United fans. Most United fans have a brain, right? And they're going to lose games of football. There's no manager they can hire where that isn't going to happen. They should have beaten Newcastle, but at the same time, Sean, we were talking before the game. This was always a tricky game. There was never a part of me that said United just need to show up and win. There was always a possibility they could lose this game. United don't have a great record at Newcastle. So I don't understand a lot of the, there's a lot of the dramatic overreaction. Like I can understand being disappointed, but hopefully now we're 2 days out from that defeat. People have a bit more of a measured reaction, look at it in context and go, very difficult to be sitting here telling Michael Carrick a new one because it's a miracle we're even in this position to be talking about this. There's what 10 days now, 9 days before the next game. Um, I think United will be all right.
Absolutely. And you're after speaking about a couple of things that we were referencing when we last spoke. You know, one of the main things that I've really been interested in is how this coaching team is going to be able to respond to adversity. It's something I've been saying for weeks now. It's all good and well to be going out there and to be picking up 3 points and picking up 1 point like we did against West Ham when maybe we, on another day, we wouldn't have done so. But I'm just very interested to see how the players and the coaching staff can respond to adversity. And not only is the loss adversity, but the run up to that defeat is all going to supply this because, as I've been discussing with you for several weeks, we're picking up these wins. But I have been speaking about how the performances have been rather concerning. I mean, like, we saw it against Everton, we saw it against West Ham, we saw it against Crystal Palace, and we saw it again against Newcastle. It There's a lot of people surprised about it, and really, it's not this great conundrum. You know, Michael Carrick and Steve Collins have come in, they've settled the ship, and they've done so in a sublime manner. But they're still dealing with many of the same issues that have been existing at this club for months upon end. And as you said, this time last season, we're in the bottom half of the table. We're still in control here. Aston Villa are in complete free fall. We play them with what, as you said, 9 or 10 days,
Yeah.
have an opportunity to extend this stance that we have inside in the top four. And if you gave the fan base this particular predicament at early March, they'd snap your hand off for it because ultimately the prospect of returning back to the Champions League when we finished 15th last season, you know, there's not a whole lot of people that were going to be considering that. But I did say at the very start that it can't just be all good. You have to look at the bad as well. And I've been nothing but complimentary about Michael Carrick since he came, particularly with Steve Holland, because I've had the privilege of actually seeing Steve Holland up close and personal. Like, he's a fantastic tactician in what he does. And as we discussed last week, Carrick embodies this idea of being able to put an arm around somebody. So it's the best of both worlds. You have the man management and you have the coaching. But one thing that I did discuss with you, and we are going to go back on this now. It's not an I told you so, but we spoke about the constant selection and how there was only changes being implemented in the side when they were injury related.
Mhm.
We've not really had to deal with inner game adversity with Carrick because they've always gone about attacking the result and it's paid dividends. Except in this particular case, you're looking at two situations that really left me scratching my head. The first one is what you've mentioned already in the latter and bringing on Tyrell Malacia. When you've got Aidan Heaven, you've got Godwill Kokonki, you've also got Tyler Fletcher on the bench. All of those players could have done more than a fella that has played 2 minutes in the last season for Manchester United. But as well as that, and it's something that I spoke about with Sam yesterday, and I still can't wrap my head around it. The general consensus ever since I was small, learning about football and when I was playing football, is that if you have a numerical advantage, the easiest thing to do is to spread the play on the football field, to make the field as wide as you possibly can. You've got a player who, up to a month ago, was seen as a key cog in this team, and Ahmad sitting on the bench, and you wait till the 75th minute to bring him on the field. Both of those decisions are the first time that left me really scratching my head and thinking, okay, they have their first opportunity to deal with adversity, and they're not handling it as necessarily calm and composed as I thought they were going to do. Did that hit you in any way when you were watching it?
I think if I agree with what you're saying. I think if I had to steel man an argument for Michael Carrick in that sense, I would say Ahmad hasn't really done anything to deserve to be brought onto the field before the 75th minute. If Ahmad had been playing well, where you're like, okay, he demands, Sesko had to do this. Sesko's come on 75th minute, then he was getting the 60th minute, then he was getting the start. Uh, we haven't seen that from Ahmad. With Malacia, I agree, but I don't think Michael Carrick had any idea he was going to be that bad. And I don't think anyone had any expectation that that was there was a professional performance capable. I mean, that's the type of performance that ends your career. I think Michael Carrick is entitled to expect that a professional footballer at left back. I think you and I would have been had a better cameo than that. Um, I think Michael Carrick is expected to feel that a left back professional footballer who is an actual left back, Aidan Heaven is not, um, is going to give you more, especially in a game where Newcastle at that moment, down to 10 men, it was essentially one way traffic. Newcastle caught United on the break. And it's inexplicable what happened. I mean, it's very difficult for a manager to predict that a professional footballer is capable of doing that. You learn that lesson once. Now, if Michael Carey puts Malacia into a game again and that happens, then I'm saying to Michael Carey, you deserve what happens next because you know what he's capable of doing, you know what he did, and still you pick him. I think that if someone goes in and lets you down that badly, it's very difficult to put that on someone who gave you the chance. Um, and it's easy for us to sit down here afterwards and go, well, you should have played Kakanki or should have played Aiden Heaven. In hindsight, that would have been correct. I just think Michael Carrick was entitled to expect better from a professional football player, and that was not a predictable outcome of bringing on Time Lassie. If I had to steel man it, Ahmad. I mean, I was talking about it briefly. He hasn't looked. He's very very skillful. He's very very good at if you look at United's front three, when was the last goal he scored? Was it Forest?
He hasn't scored in a bit, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, Mega carries well within his rights to say, well, what have you done on a football pitch that suggests you should be brought in more than that? Because one of the things we're talking about here, Sean, is players have to understand there's consequences for inconsistency. For too long, we talked about this just as we were coming into the show about players that are being picked despite putting in bad performances that are not consistent. And Carrick doesn't have the alternatives to be able to play alternative players. There has to be consequences. There has to be, if you play badly, Carrick has to shake up that team. Sesko showed this is how you get back into the team. To me, a matter forward, he either has to start creating or scoring goals to for me to have any sympathy of you should have been brought on earlier. I think Mbumo looks like a player that badly needs a rest. He looks a fraction of the player that we were seeing during that period when Carrick just came in. It's United need that from him again because they just don't have the alternatives. I feel for Carrick in a way because he wanted a midfielder in January, didn't get one. I think if he had got one, would have significantly helped him against Newcastle. United lost the game at Old Trafford against Newcastle, if you remember that disaster under Amorim because of the midfield, and I think they did it again.
Yeah, well, obviously Casemiro was being asked to do something he hasn't done in quite some time, wasn't he? Play 2 games within 3 days of each other, and
Yeah,
we saw him getting hocked off after an hour. I want to touch on Ahmed with you because I know we spoke very briefly about him in recent weeks. When you are speaking about him and you're speaking about his form and what he is and is not doing, are you basing this totally on his, we'll say, his output in terms of his goals and an
yeah.
assist? Is that where he's letting you down?
I think that's primarily the two biggest metrics you have to judge a forward on. Anthony had brilliant stats where he was the first player to close players down and recover the ball. But you're a winger. I'm going to judge you on the goals and assists because ultimately that's what you're in the team to do. You're in a forward position, 3 forwards, 2 forwards, whatever way you play. My forwards have to be scoring, have to be creating. Ahmad doesn't have to be as prolific as a central striker, but he has to be creating, he has to be scoring. And if you're going, he hasn't scored since Forest, which was October. Remember, I mean, Sean, at this level, that's not good enough.
The reason that I'm saying it though is like I dive into this stuff massively on a weekly basis. And yes, he doesn't have the goal contributions, but something I had said to you recently that he has like the penultimate ball before the assist. And so much of that is going down through his carrying, his dribbling, the build-up play that he has, and the transitional play, the 1-2 passing, if it's with Bruno or if it's with Brian Mbumo. Because we saw Bruno pick up his 14th assist in that game against Newcastle at the Premier League season. There has been at least half of those, if not more, that Ahmad has been instrumental in the build-up play
Yeah.
with him. And he's led to the penultimate pass before Bruno has delivered the ultimate assist. So while I can understand that if you're looking at it from a very, very extreme perspective and just looking at goals and assists, looking at those two columns, then it's very easy to see where the likes of Cunha, Mbumo, and Sesko are going to get picked
Yeah.
because they're filling those over the last few weeks, whereas Ahmad doesn't have any. But I believe we're now starting to see the ramifications of him out of the team because
Mm.
he is the only real winger that we have in the side. You know, this is something that we're absolutely devoid of, Phil, because we sold so many of them.
I think, yeah, of course, this is one of the consequences of the stupid Ruben Amorim experiment. And I agree with what you're saying. Like, to me, there's a lot of nebulous information inside the word assist. If someone beats six players, passes a ball to somebody who then passes it through to a striker to tap the ball in, who should
Mhm.
get the assist? Right? It should be the guy that beat six players. He made it
Exactly.
happen. Right. And inevitably, it's not negative about everything. And Ahmad is very, very important in the sense that when you don't have a team that can cut you open from open play, you need to rely on counterattacks to do that. You need players with individual quality that can create things out of nothing. So that, I mean, and Bimo is not the type of player that's going to do what Ahmad does. Um, Bimo's the type of player I want on the end of what Ahmad does.
And you see, this is another reason I'll add into what you're talking about right now, because you've mentioned how Mbumo looks a shadow of himself since he came back from AFCON.
Mm.
It's no coincidence that with Ahmad's reducing minutes on the field and the lack of that partnership that we had seen grow between the two of those players, that you now start to see a fall off in Mbumo's output and his aptitude on the field.
Do you not think that's also a consequence of the fact that Sesko was being left out? Because Sesko and Mbumo had a very, very good partnership where Mbumo was feeding off a lot of Sesko's link play, flicking balls on over the top. Also, I think when you were talking about these results, West Ham, Everton, Newcastle, these are all away games. These are games where teams are sitting in deep against United and not giving that space in behind that the likes of Mbumo thrives on. Mbumo is a much better player in big games because those teams come out will give you space in behind. When teams are sitting deep in against you and not giving you that space, everything's in defeat. Everything's in front of the back four. And that then requires, for me, when you're playing that type of game, that's where I think Ahmad is very important because if everything's in defeat in front of the defender, you need somebody that can beat a defender and create something out of nothing. And I think Ahmad draws penalties, he draws free kicks that never get included into the final assist. Data sheet, they don't count. But I think that, yeah, look, it's not, you can't turn around and say it's all negative. I just feel that a player of his ability, there's more in him. But again, when you're not playing with a central, a lot of these games we're talking about, you need to have him play with a central striker focal point, and Sesko won't. So it's for wingers, it's different when you're playing with an out and out striker and when you're not. And how things go through players. But I feel that I rate him out so highly. I think that there's more in him.
I think this is a massive conundrum that Carrick and Holland face now.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you look at the setup, you've got your two midfielders in Meno and Casemiro, and Bruno is always going to play above them. So then you're talking about three positions. And it's even going to get more difficult to fit this conundrum together when Patrick Dorgu is back fit, when Mason Mount is back fit. Because
Yeah,
realistically, how many players do you have fighting for three positions? I
I
mean,
don't think.
sorry, go on.
I go ahead.
I mean, like Sesko is the only out and out striker that we have.
Yeah.
I mean, Cunha, I know he has played a huge part of his career as a striker, and I think he's actually rather good at doing it as well. A lot of people might favour him as a second striker because of the catalogue and what he has in his career. But Sesko is that only out ball as a number 9. But yet then you have to factor in two sides of it. You have to factor in the playing style and the character traits of all these players when they're playing with a big man up top, as opposed to an interchangeable front line that consists of a bunch of players that are happy to move across various positions in that sort of a triangle pivot. And this is a huge dynamic. It's a huge conundrum that Carrick and Holland are going to face because, especially when you add Dorgu back into the mix, there's going to be a lot of players crying out for playing time and very little time to be able to do it.
Yeah, I think that's healthy. I think that that's exactly what United need. And look, I don't know what the answer to this is. It's to be fair, United. If you look at their recent statistics, they had the longest unbeaten run outside of Inter Milan going into this game in Europe,
Hmm.
right, which was unbelievable. They had the most shots on goal outside of Juventus, I think, across all of Europe. They're definitely an attacking team. If you look at the stats of Capimano and stuff, since Carrick came in, how many balls in the final third they're playing, the stats are very, very healthy. Um, but they definitely lack depth. And Big Xerxes comes on, almost scores. It's beautiful touch, great to watch. If ever there was a player that fit the description of luxury player, it's Joshua Xerxes. It was made for him. Just a wonderful player to watch, a great player to have in your team. If you're winning 2-0, 3-0, you bring him on a game, or you're comfortably beating the opposition, then you can enjoy what Xerxes. They almost scored a fantastic goal, by the way. But it just doesn't have that. He's not a number 9. It's going to sit on the final on the last defender's shoulder. So yeah, look, I Michael Carrick needs genuine width. I don't know whether he starts thinking about Shea Lacey in this position before the end of the season, because Shea Lacey is a genuine wide player.
Hmm.
When he came on against Villa, he looked very, very good. So I think Carrick might have to start considering that. But yeah, I don't know, Sean. It's not an easy question to answer, and I Carrick is having to try to play a 4-2-3-1 almost with a squad that's halfway on its way to playing a 3-5-2 or a
Yeah.
5-3-2. And it just, you can see it's unbalanced. And I just don't think United, all things being considered, are good enough to dominate games of football away from home yet. And I think that they're a couple of midfielders short. And that's where the game is won. The game's won in the middle of the park. They're a couple of midfielders short of being able to do that. They'll have to address that this summer. We've heard the news rumours about Andy Mitten, of course, talked about United looking at a couple of Spanish midfielders. But also what we have to factor in, Sean, this has to be said. Michael Carrick, just like any Man United manager, has basically an almost impossible job. You heard Ange Postecoglou talk about it. How do you deal with just a deluge of ex-players who have tremendous bitterness towards United? It's all coordinated. Gary Neville, Roy Keane, Paul Scholes, Nagy. But for anyone that's listening to this, Woodward hated the class of '92, right? And deliberately did not want them in key positions at the football club. You can start to see where, I don't know if their anger towards United is causal of that, is relative to that. And maybe they have got very good reasons for being bitter towards United. But you have to deal. Paul Scholes played with Michael Carrick. That is petulance. That's something I would expect out of Mark Goldbridge. For legends like Paul Scholes to be coming out and doing stuff, it's really sad. And all these ex-players that have turned on the football club. Liverpool getting a bit with Jimmy Carragher going after Mo Salah, but nothing like this. And it's bizarre. I mean, imagine Kenny Dalglish sitting on Sky Sports just turning to Arne Slot in Liverpool, or if Robbie Fowler got you would find that odd, especially whenever it's not consistent. And Gary Neville, they clearly have a specific agenda, and that has a personal element to it. And I think that makes any manager's job at United so difficult.
Oh, I genuinely cannot tell you how much I hate speaking about these people now. I've spent days and weeks writing and talking about them. Firstly, the simplistic thing to say about it, especially with the likes of Paul Scholes, it is a prime example of how elite football IQ on a field does not transfer into normal IQ on a day 9 to 5. Because if ever there was a time for an individual to just heed his own advice when he was a player and stop speaking to the media, it is Paul Scholes who should be doing that right now. He has opted to devise a post-playing career that is just built on notoriety. And I mean, I'm not going to start tracking back on stuff we've already spoken about how these pundits have no idea what it's like to play for Manchester United in modern day because of the advancements with social media and how they never dealt with anything. But this is a clear, categoric, it's a pattern And like, we didn't have to wait hours for Scholes to come out with his social media post after that game. This was within minutes. And,
That actually disappointed me more than the result.
Say that again.
That actually disappointed me more than the result.
Oh yeah, it's pathetic. Like, and I know. Look, I know there's an end game with it. I know someone is telling him that there's no such thing as bad publicity, and you've got a podcast, and we want to get as many eyes on this podcast as we possibly can. We want to get as many people downloading it. So the more controversial things that you and Nikki can say, the better off this podcast is going to be. But when you really strip it back, Phil, the kind of stuff that he's saying, you've referenced it. It's just childish. I mean, it's not constructive criticism. It's not constructive feedback. I mean, this is a player, 11 Premier League titles. Yeah, I mean, widely considered as one of the greatest players of all time. Like, with the very best of respect, could you not offer something constructive that the coaching team could maybe benefit from if you feel like they're doing something wrong? Is there not something that you can provide to the players that can give them a bit of motivation to try and support the backup and the education that's been provided by a former legend at a football club? There is nothing beneficial, Phil, to what they are doing. It is the complete opposite.
If you had people in the media going after United players like this under Ferguson,
they'd be gone.
Take a look at what Ferguson did with Glenn Hoddle over Beckham and all this, right? Just they go mental. They go absolutely mental over this, right? And rightly so. And you ask anyone that's good at their profession to explain why they were good at it, and you're going to get a bunch of cliched bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Because no one really knows, right? Oh, it's because I was disciplined. Oh, it's because I put in the work. Oh, it's because bullshit. No one knows why they're good at something, because no one can theoretically write down how this is how you get. All you can do is practice. Certain genetic factors, environmental, just certain things that would try to explain that. Ask Michael Jordan to explain how he was great at basketball. You're just going to get stereotypical answers about practice, about dedication, about focus, about all the stuff that does not make you a great basketball player. It helps you. So, Paul Scholes was a great player. And look, I have certain bitterness towards previous employers that are very good personal reasons. And if somebody who wasn't an employee at that company was attacking me for attacking my previous employer, I might get pissed off a bit and go, you have no idea what you're talking about. So I can understand if they clearly have certain personal issues with United. I mean, Paul Scholes was talking about this with tickets and everything, right? There's obviously an issue with how they feel about, and maybe they've got exceptionally good reasons for that. I don't know. But to come out and attack Michael Carrick like that, it just looks like you're waiting for United to lose. And I just think that is so childish and petulant. And there's a way of, the way Roy Keane went into it for him personally. Gary Neville, Sesko's not the perfect striker, as if anyone thought he was, as if he needs to be. Does that apply to anyone else? And just this constant, the Lisandro Martinez stuff. And you're going, how does any United manager survive here? I mean, how do you shut all that out? Because that, of course, gets inside players' heads. They hear that. Wayne Rooney, exceptionally measured, very, very good pundit, someone I enjoy listening to. But watching, the overlap is essentially a Man United podcast, right? All these media outlets, they're all starting their own podcast. Fair enough, I'm not a hypocrite. Go ahead and do what you want. But this fixation on just, the Lisandro Martinez thing about Holland, I felt like they wanted United to lose the City so that it could, and that actually happened in the game so that they could go see I told you. So there's something deeply personal about that. And it's just really disappointing as a United fan to watch because, you all worship these players. We all adored them. They were great. And you're allowed to criticize a football club. God love Martin Keown, mate, right? Because whatever you say about Keown, at least he loves Arsenal Football Club. And he talks about Arsenal in such a deferential way. I'm not saying United players have to be that, but at least he respects the club he played for.
Yeah.
Where were always, by the way, where were Scholes, everyone else coming out when United fans needed them to come out for the Glazers and stuff and really needed their voice? Where were they all?
Well, you see, that's just too much work for them. This is something that I've written about this in great detail. You go back as far as 2014 when Scholes first started getting very vocal, and obviously he laid into David Moyes at the time in some way, got heard in the dressing room, and Moyes was quoted in saying, "Yeah, he's killed me there." And like that's an absolute fact. This is real, right to the heart, to the core, damaging comments from a club legend inside an already fragile dressing room that's trying to come to some sort of coherence with a different manager and to support him. And then you've got these individuals coming out doing this. It's counterproductive in every way. And really, it buys into the fragility of the football club over the past 2 decades, Phil. Like these ex players that should be providing some sort of a solace. And as you said, standing up against this idle ownership that's sitting in its ivory tower so many hundreds and thousands of miles away. And yet,
Also,
instead of that, what are they doing? They're not doing anything beneficial to help you and me or anybody else that's going putting bums on seats.
well, if you want to take aim at Manchester United, don't be taking aim at Michael Carrick. Michael Carrick,
Exactly.
whatever problems exist at United, Michael Carrick inherited them. They're not his, right? And to me, there's a million other people you can take aim at Manchester United that would actually United fans would get behind and welcome. To me, to go after Michael Carrick is just ridiculous. And I don't know. Imagine that was your ex teammate. Like, I don't care what Carrick says. That hurts because there's just a better way of doing it. And one of the things I accept that we don't like about pundits is sometimes they're too overprotective with their mates, and that's understandable, Sean. When you have a personal relationship with a human being, you speak about them differently. That's just a fact, right? So we're all biased and prejudiced towards people that we know personally. We have we've bonded with, we have personal emotions with, we're friends, whatever, or we like each other, or that. Instead, when you're commenting on someone you don't know, you'll never speak to. It's almost like you're speaking about an avatar. It, so it's easy to say certain things about people that you'll never ever meet in your life. And I just think that well, the likes of Paul Scholes, everything, like, there's just the way that they've gone personal is actually a poor reflection on them. It's no one really, I'd say, United fans and other media commentators look at that and think it's an accurate commentary on what's going on at the football club. It's more about personal, childish, petulant agendas, and it's very transparent. It's blatantly obvious. I mean, how long did it take him to even mention the Lissandro Martinez thing? Apologize if they got it wrong. It took what, a couple of weeks before they even really. They were still doubling down on it after it, and you can see him like. No one does that when your objective is honest commentary. This is people do that when they're trying to settle personal scores.
Yeah, well, like Phil, just look at the ludicrous nature of it all. That they started critiquing players who should know better when they're at Manchester United, and they should be able to take this sort of stuff in the chin when you're playing for the biggest club in the world. Yet when they start getting criticism in response to what they've said, they immediately go on the defensive.
Mhm.
They're just completely.
Don't criticize me for the fact that I'm allowed to criticize you whatever I want, but for God's sake, don't criticize me.
And do as I say and not as I do. But then, you look at you're talking about the personal stance. Look at Keno and how he has carried a grudge against Carrick's wife. To even bring Carrick's wife into the
That is
conversation. Like, there's no logic in any of this. And I think, look, we could stay speaking about this for quite some time, but it's maybe we can stay on the topic of this toxicity and the unnecessary prevalence that's been put towards the football club and the damage on working class supporters with the news that's after coming out today that season tickets are going to rise by another 5% for the fourth consecutive season, meaning that if I've got my figures correct here, a season ticket is going to cost £100 more than it did 3 seasons ago. Now, I know the club is coming out and their stance on this is that it's continued measures to be able to build up your proper cash flow to reintroduce it back into the playing squad and into the facilities and the infrastructure, ultimately leading towards Project 150. But it is as tone deaf as you can possibly be in the face of complete and utter just it's spitting in the face of me, it's spitting in the face of you, it's spitting in the face of every supporter who ever wants to go over and have any connection with this football club, Phil.
Sean, if I'm making 100 grand a month and spending 70 on cocaine, it's not more money than I need, right? United are talking about record revenues every quarter. It's not ticket prices. We're not just a one ticket price away from financial health. This is a consequence of the people that are right next to you that are sodomizing the football club and any profit. Does anyone think the Glazers are not going to rapaciously take? They're going to hoover up that profit? This is bullshit. This is exactly what these people do. They privatize the gains and publicize the losses. You know, we were told that the ticket price increases were the same thing about getting United profitable. They posted a profit. So when they become profitable, do they go back to fans and say, well, now that we've stabilized the business, we're in the black, we're going to bring prices back down because that was a time. Do they? Fuck. Never. Right?
You know, it's the same thing, right? It's the same thing as back here. And you know this all too well. When we start getting new roads built over here and they stick toll bridges on them to pay for the new roads. And then when that's all paid back, the tolls remain there to keep the upkeep of the roads when in reality the roads are still destroyed.
Remember whenever we got those baggage fee increases because of the credit crunch crisis and the price of fuel, and airlines are going to, once they establish a buying pattern of you paying a particular price point, you're never getting it back. Never. Yep. No one ever in the history of humanity sat in a boardroom and said, let's cut prices. No one does that, right? The only time you ever see anything like that is whenever people stop paying. So whenever fans collectively understand their unionized power together and stop paying the shit, I mean, you're going to see it here, right? Come September, October, when the US are getting 5,000 at a home match for Panama, I sincerely hope that the fans turn around and call the USSF and MLS and all that, why we need to go out and support the women's game, and tell them to fucking call the people they sold World Cup tickets to. Let's see if they come for the Panama home game, right? Because they'll draw the curtains if they're playing in the front garden. Now you'll be a fan again, and back in October, September, whenever they can't sell a ticket. But whenever they can, you're a customer, a broke-ass one at that, to borrow American parlance. Exactly the same concept now in European football. Let's be honest, they're desperate to get. They let ticket touting happen for a reason, because they want to establish a precedent of people paying a certain price for tickets. They're going, well, if these ticket touts can start moving tickets at $5,000 a piece, just let it go, because that's what we're going to do. Because they're establishing a market for us, right? And eventually we'll fill the gap with the ticket too. So it's about dollars and cents. If it makes dollars and cents, it makes sense. That's it. And so you'll be fans when they can't sell tickets. Your customers when they can. And until fans stop paying for this shit, until they stop doing it, it will never stop. But yeah, Premier League has got more money than at any other time in history. They should be able to be profitable. If you're not profitable right now, it has nothing to do with the revenue you're generating. It has to do with how you're running that business.
Yeah, and I think even a greater spit in the face to the entire situation was the decision that got announced alongside it that they're moving 600 supporters from the Sir Bobby Charlton stand to make more space for hospitality inside the stadium. As if it wasn't bad enough that it was already done. There is the complete definition of just refusing to read the room.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it is. There is, and you see, this is going to generate further backlash because we've already seen must. And there's a natural response of disappointment and complete bewilderment as to why they continue to make these decisions. And it falls back on something that we discussed a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, when Radcliffe came out and made his preposterous comments about colonization and whatnot. These individuals are living on a different planet than us, Phil. And it's something that I try to explain to my son and try to educate him about as he's growing older, that no matter how hard you and I work, there's only so far we're ever going to get on that ladder, because there's a divide in society that just goes even beyond the football club, that the worker bees will do everything and just continue to make more power for those individuals that could care less about me and you and the feelings of those 600 supporters that are going to be moved inside in the Sir Bobby Charlton stand. It's just never ending.
Sean, every single human right, every single constitutional right, whatever it is, workers' rights was a result of people withholding labour. Now, it wasn't given out of some sense of benevolence or kindness or decency. It was because it got to a point where it was costlier to not do it than do it.
Mm.
Every single one of them had to be fought for. And now people want to nuance them and give them back. Unbelievable. So they need a market. They need consumers. Without the fan, there was a girl that was on Sky Sports about 2 weeks ago. Some people laid into. I thought she was bang on, by the way, about how not the way with the product, but without the fan, there's nothing. There's no TV deals. There is no Premier League. You're just 22 men having a kickabout in the park. But they're the only ones that never get considered. Why do they never get considered? Because they don't withhold. They're part of the transaction. So you get treated based on how you treat yourself. I understand we all want to go to football. I understand we all want, but until fans, you take a look at Germany. Germany's a brilliant example of what happens when you get collective cooperation amongst fans and understand about their mutual interests. And despite who they support, they all have a mutual interest. And they have affordable ticket prices. They are getting 30, 40,000 for youth team games. The game is alive and well there as a sport that still has a price point where people who sustain the game in the grassroots level, because they have a price point, that an acquisition cost that allows them to go to games. See, if you just sell it as an event, you lose it in the fabric of your culture. You lose it as a grassroots sport. If you just, we're going to find 60,000 people in this particular area that will pay this price. Fine, but then you'll lose football as a grassroots sport forever. I
There's a
mean,
lot to be said about 50 plus one there as well, though, isn't there?
Riyadh's not developing a massive boxing culture because it's hosting events. It's just an event. But if you don't let people into those events that are at the very bottom, that are the lifeblood and heartbeat of that particular sport, then this is like hosting the orchestra. You're going to get enough people that will pay. But look, boxing's now relegated to an almost insignificance because they swapped their fans for a hardcore element of people that will pay no matter what. We don't need millions and millions and millions of fans. We just need 250,000 people that will pay pay-per-view for two flies fighting in a barroom. And now look what happens. No one gives a shit about it anymore unless you're someone like me, or there's essentially a few communities that keep that sport alive. The Latino community out here, UK, Irish people, for the most part, I say to that, no one really watches it. And so that's because they swapped their mainstream audience for a hardcore element that will pay no matter what. Within 20, 30 years, boxing went from the Mike Tyson era to total irrelevance. And football needs to be very careful because in the modern era, with democratization of the media, social media, everything, it's very easy to destroy brands in real time. And there's a lot of competition for eyeballs. And all those regional gaps now have gone. NFL now is as mainstream in the UK as anything else. It used to be it wasn't because of the distance. Now, no. And so football needs to waken up because even this World Cup, I don't know why anyone would pay to go to this World Cup. I do not understand it.
Well, I certainly wouldn't. And
and I'm living in LA. I won't go.
Well, unless you can get in for free, unless you can
I
break in
wouldn't
the
even
back
go
of
for getting for free, Sean. Even if
it.
get in for free, Sean, I could get a media pass, you get a press pass, you go. I
Yeah,
have
I know.
no interest in it. It's the
I know.
biggest bunch of shit.
But you know, it's something that we discussed a lot, and it's something that we both detail, even from a footballing and from a political standpoint, about looking at working class and objectives, and something that you speak about quite regularly about when a commercial asset and commercial profitability is is the predominant goal of a background team and an ownership of a football club. You're never going to have footballing success when commercial ventures is what's the priority. When you look at this football club now again raising season ticket prices, again removing working class people from their seats and putting in hospitality, is that a commercial advantageous move, or is that about increasing the revenue to benefit the football team? What way are you looking at it?
So, Sean, when you turn your fan base into customers. If I'm going to the market, I'm paying for the best product available. Why would I show up to Manchester United when they're in 16th? Why wouldn't I just go watch Real Madrid? I have a choice with my money. I'm not a fan, I'm a customer. I want to be entertained. When you're 16th, you need fans. When you're first, you can have customers. Right? You want to turn it into a purely transactional consumer base, then I'm going to judge you as one. If I went to the market with a product that was the 16th worst in the market and said to consumers, I'm going to charge you more for that particular product because we have run the business into the ground. The product is inferior to 15 others on the market. You're going to pay the same or more. Why would anyone do that? Right? So you have to decide what you want. And your fans, you're part of the experience until you're not. So if you want to be judged purely as a business, you have a problem in football because people go to very, very, very few people are going to have so much brand loyalty in life to where they're going to buy an exceptionally shitty product at an extremely high price to help the company. Because when the company experiences profitability, those prices of that product's not coming back down. And who's going to be the beneficiary of it? You help them get back in the black, and they ain't helping you after that. That doesn't sound like a quid pro quo here. Like, no, they can't have it both ways. You can't be a business that happens to play football, because if you are, if you're sitting and come on out and support the West Ham and keep us up, why would I do that? I can go. I want the team, and I can go somewhere else.
And all they get back in response for it, in terms of being a loyal season ticket holder, is that they have chosen to, what have they done? They've reinstated the European collections, and they've held back in the minimum usage on the tickets.
Yeah,
It's just constant spitting in the face.
of
And
course.
that's
Until
and
that's not up, Sean, until they say no more, this will keep happening. They're going to keep pushing it to
but you
see
see
how very quickly.
the thing is they will keep doing it, Phil. But at some point there has to be more than just the standard protest, which, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the protest. By all means protest. I've been a
I
part of
agree.
many of them. But we need to take a better stance as a fan base.
I agree.
The only way that you're going to target these individuals, the only way that you're going to make a meaningful point against these individuals, and the only way you're going to hurt them is if you hurt their pockets. And there's only one way you can hurt their pockets. It might be difficult for certain individuals to be able to pull back from it due to generations of support. I've had generations of support. It doesn't matter that I'm not from Manchester. I've made plenty of people know my case, and that I'm going down from my father to myself to now my son. And it's a constant love of this football club. But I had a season ticket. I handed back the season ticket when the Americans arrived. And I know it's not as easy for everybody else to do that. And I can understand that. I appreciate every single decision. But the only way that you are going to affect this is if you hit them in their pocket. Because
100%.
it's one thing protesting outside the ground, but then when you walk in and you take your seat, all they're doing is licking their lips at you, and they're just saying, yeah, protest all you want and keep paying us.
I completely agree. Look, Wesley, we started this conversation by saying you don't get anything until you withhold something that they need from you.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, and it's something that I feel we're going to be discussing many, many more times on this podcast, unfortunately, as boring as it is. And, at this point, normally we could start talking about the next fixture that we have and all the positivity that we have on the field. But now we have to wait nearly 2 weeks until we get to see a football game again.
Mm-hmm.
It's um, it's all
Weird too.
very, it's
Yeah.
all very frustrating, this lack of domestic cup football and European football and whatnot. But look, I'm sure there's going to be plenty that's going to rear its head for Manchester United between here and then. And
Sure.
even though we won't have a football game, I'm sure we can meet up again this time next week, sit down and discuss whatever it is rears its head between here and then, man.
Yep, we will back next week. We will record again next week. So I look forward to that. Enjoy your weekend, Paul. All of you who are listening to this, thank you for downloading the podcast. Thank you for following Sean. Thank you for following myself. Thank you for all the support, all the messages, and for subscribing. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And until we talk again, I hope your mental and physical health as well.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody. Thanks a lot for tuning in.
Thanks, Sean.